Hello. Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you for coming back to listen to more of Dad, Thad, and my skateboard. Today we are on part 8, which is called Skateboard Escape. Here we go. I started the ignition of my dad's truck, but instead of pulling out of the parking lot, I just sat there, idling in the dark night. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. I was such a jerk. I completely dismissed how Thad was feeling. Clearly, he did not like the attention of those girls. Why did I make him feel bad about that? Why should he like it? And why would I not believe him when he said he had a rough day? What kind of friend does that? I bonked my head back against the headrest and stayed there for a long while. Finally, I decided I should text Thad something, but I didn't know how to explain what I was thinking, so I just said, "I'm sorry," and hit send. I pulled the truck's lever into gear and drove out of the pool's parking lot. I didn't want to go home yet, so I drove the 5 or 6 blocks past the shopping mall to Chrissy's house. Her mom answered the door and said that Chrissy was with Bryce. Interesting. I thought Chrissy was going to spend the evening with her mom. But I hopped in my truck again and drove a few more blocks until I reached Bryce's fairly wealthy neighborhood. A couple narrow streets further and I reached Bryce's cul-de-sac. His white stucco home was probably 4 times the size of Grandma's. All the lights of both stories seemed to be on, and several cars were parked around the circle near his house. Chrissy's minivan was in the driveway. Wait a minute. They're not having the party thing, are they? I looked around for Connor's Jeep, and there it was, parked by the hedges near the sidewalk. I searched for Thad's Honda, but I didn't see it anywhere. I parked my truck behind Chrissy's van and walked up the few porch steps. Loud laughter exploded from inside. I banged on the door. A few moments later, a young man in his early 20s answered. He looked a lot like Connor, but taller with wider cheekbones. His face lit up when he saw me. "Hey, here for the party?" His words were like a jab in my side. Maybe," I stammered. "Come on in." He was all smiles as he swung the door wide open. "Are you Connor's brother?" I asked as I stepped over the threshold. His smile didn't leave his face. "Nope, his cousin. I'm Josh." He held out his hand to me. I took his hand and shook it. "I'm Stacy." "Ah, Stacy. So you're Connor's crush." Can't say that I blame him. His grin spread so that his eyes crinkled. My eyebrows shot up. "What?" Josh laughed. "Come on, join the party." He loosely tugged my arm and led me down the rock entryway, around the corner, and into a bright, spacious room, scattered with a dozen or so people. Some stood with plates of food in their hands, and others sat on either of the 2 sofas, gabbing away. A giant bowl of salsa sat on the table in the center, with several bags of chips. Soft music was playing in the background. "Connor's girlfriend's here," Josh announced loudly. My face flushed, and everyone in the room turned to look at me. I spotted Connor, Bryce, and Chrissy right away. They stood together by the dormant fireplace on the far side of the room. Connor's face was beet red, and so was Bryce's face, and Chrissy's. All 3 joined the "everyone stare at Stacy" moment. I glared back at my friends the best I could. A guy sitting on a sofa spoke up. "That's your girlfriend, Connor?" Connor batted a hand at him. "No." Then he turned to Josh. "You're an idiot." Josh grinned and lifted a red plastic glass before taking a sip. "Hey, Stacy," said Connor, walking up to me. Bryce and Chrissy followed. "Hey, guys," I said, in the sweetest sarcastic tone I could muster. "So you decided to have the party after all, huh?" They all stumbled over their words. Yeah, Didn't Bryce text you?" Connor said. Bryce pointed to himself, feigning surprise. "Oh, I was supposed to do that?" "Well, yeah, we're at your house," said Connor. I rolled my head. "Oh, please, you guys. It's obvious you didn't want me here. I just don't know why." They all stumbled over their words again. No, we wanted you here. Yeah. I folded my arms across my chest. "Right. That's why you lied to me and told me it was canceled." I looked at Bryce. "And why you made up some lame excuse of why you weren't coming to the pool." I looked at Chrissy. Then all 3 started talking at once, and I couldn't understand any of them. "Oh, shut up!" I snapped. Shockingly, they all did. And, being the mature person I always was when I was angry, I said, "You guys suck." Then I spun around and barreled around the corner of the stone hallway. "Oh, come on, Stacy," they called after me, but I was out the front door before they could catch me. "Stacy, we didn't want to leave you out," Chrissy called from the threshold. I flipped a hand up in the air without turning around. "Whatever." All three of them started shouting, and Bryce almost made it to my truck before I climbed in and slammed the door shut. He had to leap out of the way when I peeled out of the driveway, nearly crashing into the car parked just off to the side. I sped out of the cul-de-sac and raced through the dark streets. My dad's truck was loud. The more I pressed on the gas, the louder it got. I pushed my foot to the floor so I could hear the engine roar as the RPMs increased. Suddenly, a dog appeared out of nowhere, and I slammed on my brakes. My body thrust forward then back as the truck came to a halt. The dog barely escaped. I gasped for air, then again and again. That was so close, and I didn't even have my seatbelt on. Idiot, I muttered aloud as I clicked my seatbelt into place. That episode doused my anger, but my adrenaline still hadn't drained from fear of hitting the dog, even by the time I made it to Grandma's house. I entered the front room where Grandma sat in her favorite chair, knitting as usual. I could hear my dad talking on the phone in the kitchen. "I'm telling you, she has great friends here," he said. "No, they really are." "What's wrong, Stacy?" Grandma asked. "Nothing," I lied, as I headed straight for my bedroom. I shut the door behind me, dumped my swim bag on the floor, and plopped backward onto my bed. I breathed in and out until my heart slowed. Finally, I pulled out my phone. Chrissy, Connor, and Bryce had all texted me, but not Thad. I sighed. He probably felt the same way about me right now as I did about my other friends. So I decided to text someone else, Jace. "Hey, I can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks. It's been a long summer without my boyfriend. I miss you. Heart emoji, kissy emoji." I lay my phone on my stomach and closed my eyes. Not a minute later, my phone dinged. It was a text from Jace. I smiled as I sat up to read it. "Oh, hey, Stacy. Not sure how to tell you this, but I've kind of hooked up with somebody else. Sorry." "What?" I yelled out loud. And I texted just that. "What?" "Yeah, like I said, I'm sorry." My thumbs went wild. Don't you remember that promise we made to each other before I left? That we wouldn't date anybody else during the summer because we wanted to stay loyal? To stay together? Yeah, but I didn't really take that seriously. Did you? My mouth fell open, and I returned to my immensely mature self. "You suck." Then Jace had the gall to reply, "LOL, you did, didn't you?" My chest burned with rage. I chucked my phone against the wall. Its case cracked before it fell to the carpet. "Stacy?" Grandma called from the other room. I grabbed my skateboard from under my bed and stormed out of the house. I had already reached the end of the driveway when Grandma opened the front door, causing a stream of light to shine directly in my path through the black night. "Stacy, it's too late to skateboard," she called after me. But I ignored her completely and pushed my foot harder against the cement sidewalk, rolling around the street corner and disappearing from her view. I knew my grandma would tell my dad, and he'd come after me in his truck very soon. So instead of sticking to lamplit streets, I made a plan to head to the hill that led down to the walkway by the creek. My dad would probably guess that's where I'd go, but that was okay. The only way to reach the creek was to walk, and there was no way he would catch up to me on foot. My adrenaline pushed me forward as I expected my dad's truck to veer around the corner at any moment. Thankfully, no vehicle came near me before I jumped off my skateboard and dashed down the grassy slope. But the hill was quite steep, and it was too dark to see where I was going, so I tripped over a rock and clumsily somersaulted down to the bottom. I grabbed my side in pain where something sharp had pierced it. My hand stung too. I must have been cut by some tumbleweeds. I groaned loudly and got to my feet, searching for my skateboard. But, like a trusted friend, it was sitting right next to me. With my foot, I flipped it into my hand, hissing when it stung my palm. I searched my dark surroundings and spotted the creek steadily flowing beside me. The cement walkway started just a few feet away from where I tumbled. Now that was lucky. I dropped my skateboard onto the cement ground and rolled away, pushing harder and harder with my foot to increase my speed. I pushed and pushed for a long, long time. I had no idea how far this creek extended, but it seemed to go on forever. After quite some time, I still hadn't heard Dad call for me, so I began to slow my feet and allowed myself to coast. The stream ran right along with me, like a soft, bubbling companion. And of course, I had my trusted skateboard, which never let me down. Finally, I rolled to a stop. Then I used my skateboard as a seat as I gazed out at the stream. I couldn't see it very well in the dark, but I could hear it flowing past me, kind of like my life, flowing right before my very eyes with no idea when or where it was going. How was I supposed to go back to Seattle when I didn't have Jace? After I moved with my mom across town, Jace was the only friend I had. And what a jerk he was! Why did I ever fall for him in the first place? I looked up at the stars for an answer. I knew exactly why. I was so mad at my dad for leaving that I subconsciously looked for a guy who was the exact opposite of him. I leaned back on my hands, forgetting about my skateboard, and it rolled out from under me. I snatched it before it could roll down into the creek. I placed it on top of my lap and traced my fingers across the black grip tape that I couldn't see but could feel. It had been so long since I used this thing. I spent so much time swimming and wakeboarding and rock climbing with my friends. But if I hadn't been skateboarding my first day at the lake, I never would have met them. Maybe my skateboard would help me make new friends when I moved back to Seattle. I moaned out loud and dumped my elbows onto its hard surface. I didn't want to go back, but at the same time, I did want to. I missed my mom terribly, but I had no friends there, and I had friends here. At least I thought I did. The only friend that hadn't screwed me over yet was Thad, but I probably messed that friendship up. Finally, my tears started to spill over, and since no one was around, I let them come. I cried and cried, noisy and loud, for a long, long time. I absolutely soaked my skateboard. I loved this thing, the first gift from my dad in a really long time. Sure, he made me work for it, but that's just because he didn't want me to be lazy like Jace. And now that I was away from Jace, I was a much better person. I wiped my nose with one big swipe of my arm. Dad was going to be absolutely livid when I got back home. But then, Thad's voice popped into my head. It just means he cares about you. I sniffed. He was right. If my dad didn't care about me, he wouldn't care that I was missing. Then a fresh wave of tears came. Thad cared about me too, I think. Even after I acted like a clueless jerk, he still asked if I needed a ride home. Who does that? I glanced back up at the stars for another long moment. I have to go back, don't I? I said out loud. Not just to Dad, but to Seattle. I took one last deep breath to collect myself. Then I hopped on my skateboard and headed home. I opened the front door as quietly as I could. I found my dad pacing the small living room. I rested my skateboard against the wall, bracing myself for the yelling that I knew would ensue. "Where have you been?" my dad bellowed. "I was just about to call the police!" "I'm sorry, I was at the creek," I told him. "The creek? At this hour? Do you know what kind of people hang out at the creek this time of night?" His face was red with rage. "There was nobody there," I said quietly. "You were there by yourself?" Dad yelled again. "What if something happened to you? You didn't even bring your phone!" He pointed one long arm toward my bedroom. "How was I supposed to know if you were safe?" "I was safe. Riding a skateboard in the dark by yourself does not make you safe." The veins in his forehead bulged bigger and bigger the longer he yelled. "I'm sorry," I said again. My dad threw a hand in the air. "You're sorry. Is that all you can say?" "Yes, and thanks for caring about me." My dad flashed me a glare, but I could tell my words had leveled out his downhill fury. He put his hands on his hips, pursed his lips, and looked away. When he peered back at me, tears were in his eyes. "I was so worried about you, Stace. It's 2:30. "I know, I'm sorry." "Why did you run off like that?" I shrugged, not knowing where to begin. Dad let out an enormous sigh and plopped on the couch. "Come sit. We need to talk." I sighed too and plopped beside him. "What did I do?" Dad asked. "Nothing." "Then what possessed you to storm out like that in the middle of the night?" he said sternly. "Do we have to talk about it tonight? I'm really tired," I said, rubbing my burning eyes. My dad waited until I looked at him to respond. His eyes were swollen and red. He appeared to be even more tired than I was. "We will talk until I am satisfied." I groaned and put my elbow up on the arm of the couch and put my head in my hand. "Fine, fire away." "What happened?" my dad said impatiently. I looked down at the ground when I spoke. My friends hate me, even Thad, maybe especially Thad, and I just found out that Jace... My voice broke and I couldn't finish. I clenched my jaw tight, but my stupid tears still came. My dad found his patience again and spoke softly. "Jace what?" After swallowing down a few sobs, I found my voice. "He's been seeing another girl. I don't even know for how long. He treated our promise like a joke." "What did he say?" Dad said in a grim tone. I wiped my eyes angrily. "It doesn't matter. He's a jerk." Dad's mouth formed into a tight line, and his face grew bright red. He was angry, the kind of anger that actually made me feel a little scared. "It's a good thing that kid lives 1,000 miles away from me," he said through his teeth. Then he jumped from his seat and pulled out his phone. "Seattle Police Department, please." "Dad, what are you doing?" "Hello? Yeah, hi, my name's George Steiner. There's an 18-year-old kid that's doing dope. Jace Cauldron. He lives on East Brussels Street." "Yes, I'm positive. Sure, you can quote me. You're welcome." Dad ended the call and tossed his phone on the nightstand. "Dad, Jace doesn't do dope. And how do you know where he lives?" "Your mom and I have been looking into him for a long time now, Stace. She thinks he was hiding it from you. And even if he doesn't do dope, he deserves a good scare." My dad raked a frustrated hand through his hair. "That kid is such a... How could he... Why did you get involved with him in the first place?" He stared at me like he really wanted an answer. I slouched low on the couch. "Please, Dad, does it even matter now?" Dad exhaled heavily and rubbed his eyes with his fingertips. "Well, I'm glad you're through with him. What was the other thing you said?" "My friends hate me." Dad rolled his eyes, his impatience seeping through again. "I'm serious. Bryce lied to me about his party being canceled. They just didn't want me to come." Dad furrowed his brow and shifted on his feet. "Okay, that problem we can deal with tomorrow. But tonight, we need to come up with a healthier choice for you when dealing with problems. Because running off in the middle of the night is not an option." "I didn't run off. I skateboarded off." My dad frowned deeply, obviously not appreciating me being a smart aleck. "This is not a joke, Stacy. You could have been hurt." I shrugged. "I could also get hurt rock climbing, but you let me do that." My dad's sternness returned. "That is not the same thing, Stacy, and you know it." I scowled. Of course I knew it. But honestly, I couldn't think of a better way to handle what I had felt. So hurt and angry. It was too embarrassing to have anyone else see that. My dad sat next to me again. This time he spoke calmly. "So what are you going to do instead next time something bad happens?" "Next time?" "There's always a next time, honey." I wanted to scowl at him, but his eyes were full of sympathy, so I scowled at the floor. Sometimes I really hated growing up. My dad leaned forward and tried to catch my eye. "Stacy?" Tears burned my eyes again, but I choked them back. "I like to go skateboarding when I'm upset. That's fine during the day, but not in the middle of the night. So you need to come up with something else. And driving is not okay either when you're that angry. Tell me about it. I almost ran over a dog tonight." My dad gently brushed my hair to one side, like he used to when I was little. "So, what are you going to do?" I let out a hefty sigh. "Well, it'd be nice if we had a punching bag or something." My dad nodded once. "Done. I'll get one tomorrow." "Seriously?" My dad shrugged. "Sure, as long as that's the only thing you punch. And if you tell me what happened at least by the day after." I nodded slowly. "Fine." My dad patted my leg, then stood. "Good. Time for bed. And no, you cannot go to Thad's practice in," he looked at his watch, "90 minutes. I'm ordering you to sleep in, no exceptions." I stood too. "You're such a mean dad," I said with a sleepy smile. My dad half smiled back. Then abruptly he pulled me in for a hug. He kissed the top of my head and said, "I love you." I wrapped my arms around him too. Regardless of how anybody else in the world felt, at least my dad loved me. I wish I knew how to tell him how much that meant to me. And that concludes part 8. Part 9 is going to be the end, I think. There might be a part 10, but I think we can wrap it up in one more episode. So please come back next week for more of Dad, Thad, and my skateboard. Happy Easter to all of you. Happy Passover. Good Friday. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Until next time, take care.